I never thought I'd tell this story. Never thought I'd live long enough to tell it honestly. But here I am, an old man now, sitting on my porch watching the sunset paint the desert red and gold. And I can't stop thinking about that little girl. About Sarah. About the day she walked into my camp with $2 clutched in her tiny fist and changed everything. My name is Jacob "Black Jack" Morrison, and 30 years ago, I was the most feared outlaw in all of Arizona territory. My gang controlled 3 towns, robbed more stagecoaches than I could count, and lawmen wouldn't come within 10 miles of our hideout in the Red Rock Canyons. I was ruthless, cold, a man with no mercy and a heart like stone. Or so I thought. It was the summer of 1885. The heat that year was brutal, the kind that makes the air shimmer like water and turns your throat to dust. My gang had just hit a payroll wagon heading to the silver mines. We'd taken $15,000 in gold and made camp in our usual spot, a hidden canyon with steep walls and only one way in or out. Perfect for men like us who had prices on our heads. I was sitting by the fire that evening, cleaning my revolver and planning our next job, when Tommy, one of my lookouts, came running down the canyon trail. Boss, you ain't gonna believe this. I looked up, annoyed. What is it, Tommy? Lawman? No, sir. It's a child. A little girl. She's walking right up the trail like she owns the place. I stood up fast, my hand going to my gun. A child? Alone? Yes, sir. She can't be more than 7 or 8 years old. Should I turn her away? My mind raced. This had to be a trick. Maybe the law had finally gotten smart, using a child as bait to find our hideout. I motioned to my men to take positions behind rocks and trees, guns ready. Let her come, I said quietly. But keep your eyes open for anyone following. 5 minutes later I saw her. She was the smallest thing coming around the bend in the trail. Her dress was faded blue calico, torn at the hem and covered in dust. Her brown hair hung in 2 braids down her back, coming loose in places. Her face was sunburned and streaked with tear tracks through the dirt. But what struck me most were her eyes, big and brown and filled with a determination that seemed too large for such a small body. She walked right into our camp, past 6 armed outlaws, and stopped directly in front of me. She was so tiny her head barely reached my belt buckle. She had to tilt her head all the way back to look up at my face. Are you Black Jack Morrison? She asked. Her voice was small but steady. I am, I said, crouching down to her level. Up close I could see she was trembling, but she held her ground. What's your name, little one? Sarah. Sarah Mae Hutchins. Well, Sarah Mae Hutchins, this is no place for a little girl. How'd you find this canyon? I followed the tracks from your horses. After you robbed the wagon yesterday, I followed them all day and all night. My blood went cold. This child had tracked us? Through the desert? Alone? Where are your parents? I demanded. Her lip trembled for just a second, but she blinked hard and the tears didn't fall. Mama's sick. Real sick. She's dying and I need help. Where's your father? Dead. He died 2 years ago when his horse threw him. She said it matter of fact, like she'd had to explain it many times before. I stood up and looked at my men. They were all watching, some looking uncomfortable, others angry that I was even talking to her. Sarah, I'm an outlaw. A bad man. I can't help you. Yes, you can. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something wrapped in a dirty handkerchief. She carefully unfolded it to reveal $2, shining bright in the firelight. I can pay you, she said, holding the coins up to me with both hands, like she was making an offering to God himself. This is all the money we have in the world. Mama said to never spend it unless it was life or death. Well, this is life or death, mister. I need a doctor for Mama, and Doc Henderson in town says he won't come out to our homestead without payment first. He wants $20. I stared at those 2 gold coins in her small, dirty hands. $20. She needed $20 and she had 2. Sarah, this isn't enough. I know, she cried out, and now the tears did come, spilling down her cheeks. I know it's not enough, but it's all I have. And I thought maybe, yesterday you took $15,000 from that wagon. That's what the men in town were saying. $15,000. So I thought maybe $2 would be enough because you already have so much and we have so little, and Mama is all I have left in the world, and if she dies I'll be all alone. The words tumbled out of her in a rush, her voice breaking, her whole body shaking. She was crying so hard she could barely breathe, but she kept holding those coins up to me, her arms stretched as high as they would go. Something inside my chest cracked. I'd seen grown men beg for their lives. I'd seen women cry when we robbed their homes. I'd hardened myself to it all. But this little girl, offering me everything she had in the world, $2 that wouldn't buy a good meal, for the life of her mother. I knelt down again and gently closed her hands around the coins. Keep your money, Sarah. Her eyes went wide with hope. You'll help? You'll get the doctor? I looked back at my men. Red Pete was shaking his head. Cousin Jake was scowling. But young Tommy had tears in his eyes, and old Moses was looking at the ground. I turned back to Sarah. Tell me about your mama. What's wrong with her? She's got the fever. Started 3 days ago. Now she can't get out of bed and she's saying things that don't make sense. She keeps calling for Papa, but Papa's dead. She doesn't even know who I am anymore. Her voice dropped to a whisper. This morning she got real cold even though it's so hot outside. That's when I knew I had to do something. That's when I decided to find you. How far did you walk? I don't know. A long way. I started yesterday morning. 20 miles. Maybe more. Through desert and rock with no water, no food, following horse tracks. This child had walked through the wilderness alone, not knowing if she'd find us, not knowing if we'd kill her when she did. All for her mother. I stood up and called out, Tommy, saddle my horse in the spare. Moses, get the medical supplies from my saddlebag. I looked at Red Pete, my second in command. I'm going to town. I'll be back tomorrow. Boss, you can't be serious, Red Pete growled. This could be a trap. And even if it ain't, you're gonna risk getting caught for some farmer's wife. I'm going, I said, my voice hard as iron. Anyone got a problem with that? No one spoke. I turned back to Sarah. Can you ride a horse? She nodded quickly. Good. You'll ride with me. We're going to get your mama help. Her face lit up like the sun breaking through storm clouds. Really? You mean it? I mean it. But first you need to eat something and drink some water. When's the last time you had food? She thought about it. Yesterday morning. I had some cornbread before I left. My jaw tightened. This child hadn't eaten or drunk anything in over 24 hours, had walked through the desert in the blazing sun, and still had the strength to stand there and bargain with an outlaw. I handed her my canteen. Drink. Slowly. While she drank, I grabbed some jerky and hardtack from our supplies. It wasn't much, but it would keep her going. As she ate, I noticed her hands. They were covered in cuts and blisters, her fingernails broken and dirty. Her feet, in their worn-out little boots, must have been covered in blisters too, but she hadn't complained once. Sarah, I said softly, you're very brave. You know that. She looked up at me with those big brown eyes. I'm not brave. I'm scared. I've been scared the whole time. But Mama always says that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what needs doing even when you are scared. Your mama's right, I thought. Your mama is very right. 20 minutes later, we were riding out of camp. Sarah sat in front of me on my big black stallion, so small I could barely feel her weight. She'd fallen asleep before we'd even made it out of the canyon, her head lolling back against my chest, completely exhausted. I kept one arm around her to make sure she didn't fall. As we rode through the desert under the stars, I couldn't stop thinking. Couldn't stop feeling. That crack in my chest had split wide open, and all the things I'd buried for years were flooding out. I thought about my own daughter. Her name had been Emily. She would have been about Sarah's age now if she'd lived. But she died when she was only 2 years old, from scarlet fever. My wife, Catherine, had died with her, caught the same sickness trying to nurse our baby through it. That was 10 years ago. 10 years since I'd buried them both on a hillside in Missouri. 10 years since I turned my back on everything good and decent and become Black Jack Morrison, outlaw and killer. I told myself I didn't care about anything anymore. That my heart had died with my family. That I was just a ghost walking around in a dead man's body, taking what I wanted and hurting anyone who got in my way. But this little girl in my arms proved I was wrong. I could still feel. I could still care. It still hurt. We reached the Hutchins homestead just before dawn. It was a tiny place, a one-room cabin with a lean-to for animals, a small vegetable garden that was dying from lack of water, and a well with a broken rope. This family had nothing. Less than nothing. I could hear the woman inside coughing before I even dismounted. I carried Sarah to the door, she was still asleep, poor thing, and kicked it open gently. The cabin was dark and stifling hot. On a narrow bed in the corner lay a woman who couldn't have been more than 30 but looked 50. Her face was flushed with fever, her hair soaked with sweat, her breathing shallow and rapid. I laid Sarah on a pallet in the corner and went to the woman. I put my hand on her forehead, burning hot. She opened her eyes, but they were glassy and unfocused. Sarah, she whispered. Sarah, baby, is that you? She's here, I said quietly. She's safe. She brought me to help. Who? Who are you? Just a friend. Don't worry about that now. I spent the next hour doing what I could, getting her to drink some water, cooling her fever with wet cloths, cleaning the infected wound on her arm that was probably causing all this. Looked like she'd cut herself on something and it had gone bad. In her weakened state, probably from not eating enough, her body couldn't fight it off. As the sun rose, I heard Sarah stirring. She sat up, confused for a moment, then saw me by her mother's bed. Mama? She scrambled over and grabbed her mother's hand. The woman's eyes opened again, and this time there was recognition in them. Sarah, baby, you came back. I got help, Mama. I found Black Jack Morrison, and he brought me home, and now he's going to get Doc Henderson. The woman's eyes shifted to me, widening with fear. Don't worry, I told her. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm going to town now to get the doctor. I'll be back before noon. I don't have money for. It's taken care of. I walked outside before she could ask more questions. I needed to get to town fast, but I also needed to be smart about it. I was a wanted man with a $5,000 bounty on my head. Walking into town in broad daylight was suicide. But I'd given my word to a little girl. And somehow, that mattered more than anything else. I rode hard to Copper Creek, the nearest town. It was barely past 6 in the morning when I arrived, early enough that the streets were mostly empty. I tied my horse behind the saloon and pulled my hat low, making my way to Doc Henderson's house on the edge of town. I pounded on his door until a gray-haired man in his nightshirt answered, looking annoyed. What in blazes? I pushed inside and closed the door. Doc Henderson? Yes, what's the meaning of? He stopped when he saw my face. I'd been in enough wanted posters that most folks in these parts knew what I looked like. His face went white. Black Jack Morrison. That's right. You know the Hutchins place? The widow and her little girl? Yes. The woman sent word a few days ago, but I told them. I know what you told them. $20. Here. I slammed a leather pouch on his table. It jingled heavy with gold coins. There's $100 in there. You're going to take your bag, ride out to that homestead, and you're going to save that woman's life. Understand? I don't. I grabbed him by the front of his nightshirt. That woman has a little girl who walked through the desert for 2 days to find me. She offered me every penny she had in the world to save her mama. So you're going to do your job, document? You're going to do it today and you're going to do it right. And if that woman dies. I let the threat hang in the air. He nodded quickly. I'll go right now. Good. And Doc? When you're done, you leave that $100 with the widow. Tell her it's payment for her husband's work on some ranch. Tell her it's from the church. I don't care. But you make sure she has money for food and medicine and whatever else they need. But this is. Do it. Or I'll come back and we'll have a different kind of conversation. I left him there, shaking and stammering, and made my way back to my horse. I should have ridden straight back to camp. Should have put distance between myself and that town. But instead I found myself at the general store. The owner, old Mr. Chin, looked surprised to see anyone so early, but he opened up when I knocked. I spent the next 30 minutes buying supplies. Flour, sugar, salt, coffee, dried beans, bacon, cornmeal, canned goods. Fabric for dresses. New boots in what I guessed was Sarah's size. Medicine. Seeds for the garden. A new rope for the well. Tools. Everything a struggling homestead might need. Deliver this to the Hutchins place, I told Mr. Chin, dropping more gold coins on the counter. Today. He looked at the money, looked at me, and wisely asked no questions. I rode back to the homestead and found Sarah sitting outside watching the road. When she saw me coming, she jumped up and ran to meet me. Did you find him? Is he coming? He's coming. Should be here within the hour. She threw her arms around my legs in a hug. Thank you. Thank you so much. I patted her head awkwardly. I wasn't used to being thanked for anything. Feared, yes. Hated, certainly. But thanked? Never. How's your mama? Still hot, but she's sleeping. She drank some water like you said. She looked up at me with those big eyes. Will she be okay? I wanted to promise her. Wanted to say yes, everything will be fine. But I'd learned long ago not to make promises I couldn't keep. The doc's real good. He's going to do everything he can. She seemed to accept this. She took my hand, just reached up and took it like it was the most natural thing in the world, and led me back to the cabin. We sat on the porch together, waiting. Sarah told me about her life, how her papa had been a good man who taught her to read, how her mama made the best apple pie in the territory, how they'd come out here to start fresh after the war. She told me about her dreams of going to school someday, of maybe becoming a teacher. What about you? She asked. Do you have a little girl? The question hit me like a bullet. I was quiet for a long moment. I did. What? She died when she was very small. Oh. Sarah squeezed my hand. I'm sorry. That must make you very sad. It does. Is that why you became an outlaw? Because you were sad. Out of the mouths of babes, they say. This child had seen right through me. Yeah, I said quietly. I guess it is. Mama says that being sad is okay, but we can't let it make us mean. She says we have to choose to be good even when bad things happen. I looked down at this wise little 7-year-old. Your mama's a smart woman. The smartest, she agreed. Doc Henderson arrived about 45 minutes later, looking nervous as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. He gave me a wide berth and went straight to work on Mrs. Hutchins. I stayed outside with Sarah, keeping her distracted with stories. I cleaned them up a bit, left out the violence and death, turned robberies into adventures, made my gang sound like Robin Hood's merry men instead of the criminals we were. After about an hour, the doc came out. She'll live, he said. The infection was bad, but I've cleaned it out and given her medicine. She needs rest, food, and clean water. Keep the wound clean and change the bandages twice a day. He looked at Sarah. Your mama's going to be just fine, little miss. Sarah burst into tears, the relieved kind, and ran inside to see her mother. The doc turned to me. I left the money like you said. Told her it was from her late husband's former employer, paying out what he was owed. She was too weak to argue. Good. Mr. Morrison, why? Why did you do this? I didn't answer him. I wasn't sure I knew myself. A wagon rolled up, Mr. Chen making his delivery. The old man and I unloaded all the supplies into the cabin while Sarah watched with wide eyes and Mrs. Hutchins protested weakly from her bed. I don't understand, she kept saying. I can't pay for all this. It's paid for, I told her. You just focus on getting better. Your daughter needs you. When everything was unloaded, I knew it was time to go. I'd been away from camp too long. My men would be getting worried, maybe thinking I'd been caught or killed. I walked outside where Sarah was examining her new boots, her face glowing with joy. Sarah, I said, I have to go now. Her smile faded. You're leaving? I have to. But your mama's going to be fine. You have food and supplies. Everything you need. She ran to me and hugged me again, harder this time. Thank you. Thank you for saving my mama. You're a good man. No, I said, my voice rough. No, I'm not. She pulled back and looked up at me with absolute certainty. Yes, you are. You just forgot for a while. But you remembered today. I couldn't speak. My throat was too tight, my eyes burning. She reached into her pocket and pulled out those $2 gold. Here. I want you to have these. Sarah, no. Please. Mama always says when someone does something real nice for you, you should give them something from your heart. This is all I have to give. Please take it. I knelt down and took the coins from her hand. They felt heavier than they should have, weighted with meaning I didn't fully understand. I'll keep them safe, I promised. Always. She smiled and kissed my cheek. Goodbye, Mr. Morrison. Maybe someday when you're not an outlaw anymore, you can come visit us. I couldn't promise her that. Couldn't promise I'd live that long or change that much. So I just nodded, climbed on my horse and rode away. I looked back once. She was standing in front of that little cabin, waving at me with both hands. I raised my hand in return, then kicked my horse into a gallop. I made it back to camp by late afternoon. My men gathered around, full of questions. Well? Red Pete demanded. What happened? Was it a trap? No trap. Just a sick woman and her daughter. You got soft, boss, he said, shaking his head. Over some kid. I walked right up to him, close enough that he had to look up to meet my eyes. You ever have kids, Pete? You know I don't. Then you don't get to tell me about getting soft. I walked away before he could respond, went to my bedroll and sat down. I pulled those $2 out of my pocket and stared at them. Everything changed that day. Not all at once. I didn't suddenly become a saint or turn myself in. But something had shifted inside me. That little girl's words kept echoing in my head. You're a good man. You just forgot for a while. Over the next few weeks, I found myself doing things differently. When we robbed stagecoaches, I made sure no one got hurt. When we took money, I had the boys leave enough for folks to get by. I started asking questions. Who are we robbing? Will this hurt families? Can these people afford the loss? My gang thought I'd lost my mind. Red Pete started grumbling about finding new leadership. But young Tommy and old Moses backed me up, and that was enough. 3 months later, I got word that there was a big robbery being planned. Some of the other gangs were going to hit a train carrying payroll for the mining companies. I knew that payroll was meant for the miners' wages. Families depended on that money. I took my gang and we hit the robbers instead. Ambushed them before they could get to the train. We returned the money anonymously, left it with a note for the railroad. That was the beginning of the end for Blackjack Morrison, Outlaw. And the beginning of something else. Something better. It took 2 more years, but eventually I turned myself in. Faced my crimes. I expected to hang, but my lawyer, paid for with the last of my outlaw money, argued that I'd reformed. That my recent actions showed redemption was possible. The judge surprisingly agreed. I got 20 years hard labor instead of a rope. I served 15 years before being released early for good behavior. By then I was 45 years old, tired and gray but alive. The first place I went was back to that little homestead. It had changed. There was a new barn, a proper house instead of a cabin, fields of healthy crops, and cattle grazing in a pasture. I almost thought I had the wrong place. But then the door opened and a young woman stepped out. She was tall and strong, with brown hair and a long braid down her back and those same big brown eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Sarah?" I said. "Sarah Mae Hutchins?" She looked at me closely, confused at first. Then her eyes widened. "Mr. Morrison?" I nodded. She ran down the steps and hugged me just like she had when she was 7 years old. "You came back. You actually came back. Mama, come quick." Mrs. Hutchins came out, older but healthy and strong. She stopped when she saw me, then smiled. "Mr. Morrison, we heard you've been released. We were hoping you might find your way here." They brought me inside and fed me. Told me their story. How the money I'd left had given them a fresh start. How Sarah had gone to school and was now teaching at the schoolhouse in town. How they'd prospered and built a real life. "It's all because of you," Mrs. Hutchins said. "You saved more than my life that day. You saved our future." I pulled those $2 from my pocket. I'd carried them every single day for 17 years, through robberies, through prison, through everything. "I think it's the other way around," I said, handing them to Sarah. "You saved me." I lived the rest of my days in a small house on the edge of their property. Helped with the ranch work, taught the local kids how to ride horses, and tried to do more good than the harm I'd caused. Sarah got married a few years later to a good man, a schoolteacher like herself. They named their first daughter Emily, after I told them about my own little girl. Every time I hold that child, I think about second chances and redemption and how one small act of courage can change everything. People sometimes ask me about my life as an outlaw. About the robberies and the shootouts and the narrow escapes. But that's not the story I want to tell. The story I want to tell is about a 7-year-old girl who walked through the desert for 2 days, found the most dangerous man in the territory, and offered him everything she had in the world, $2 to save her mother. The story I want to tell is about how that little girl looked at a man everyone called a monster and saw something good inside him. Something he'd forgotten was there. The story I want to tell is about how sometimes it takes the smallest person with the biggest heart to remind us who we really are. Sarah's mother was right. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what needs doing even when you are scared. And Sarah taught me something else too. Being good doesn't mean you never did bad things. It means you choose, every day, to be better than you were yesterday. I'm an old man now, sitting on my porch, watching Sarah's children play in the yard. I lived a long life, much longer than a man like me deserved. I saw Sarah grow up, get married, have children of her own. I walked her down the aisle on her wedding day because her papa couldn't. I held her babies when they were born. I became part of the family I saved and who saved me. In my pocket I still carry $2. Polished smooth from years of handling, they catch the light of the setting sun. They're worth more to me than all the gold I ever stole. Because they remind me of the day I learned that it's never too late to change. That one choice, one moment of doing the right thing, can start you down a different path. And they remind me of a little girl who saw a good man inside a bad one, and loved him back to life. That's the story I want to tell. That's the story I need people to know. We can all change. We can all be better. Sometimes we just need someone to believe in us first. And sometimes that someone is a 7-year-old girl with $2 and a heart big enough to save everyone she meets.